Chief Petty Officer Travis Rourke laughed when the black woman in the gray rental sedan told him her visitor authorization was valid. "Ma'am, if the Navy wanted you on this base, you'd already be inside." 12 hours later, he would stand at attention in a hangar packed with officers and sailors while that same woman walked toward the podium in dress whites, 2 silver stars on her shoulders. But at 6:42 on that Thursday morning, Rear Admiral Vanessa Cole said nothing. She looked at the clock on the dashboard and began to count. Naval Station Port Mason sat where Virginia met the gray Atlantic. Piers, hangars, warehouses, and rows of brick housing that had outlived generations of sailors. For most people driving through Gate 4, it was a checkpoint. For Vanessa Cole, it was the front door to the command she would formally inherit the next morning. She was 58, 5'6" in sensible shoes, with silver beginning to show in the short curls at her temples. Navy blue blouse under a plain tan jacket. Dark slacks. Reading glasses on a thin cord around her neck. Nothing about her suggested ceremony. No uniform, no flag officer vehicle, no aide, no driver, no stars. That was intentional. For 32 years, Vanessa had watched institutions prepare themselves for important visitors. Floors suddenly shone. People suddenly remembered regulations. Commanders who had ignored a broken light for 6 months discovered electricians the afternoon before an admiral arrived. Nobody lied. Exactly. They simply showed you the version of themselves they wanted inspected. So, when the Chief of Naval Operations approved her appointment as commander of the newly reorganized Atlantic Shore Navy region, Vanessa asked the outgoing commander, Rear Admiral Peter Halverson, for one unusual favor. 24 hours before the change of command. No announcement. No official car. No photograph distributed to the gate. Halverson had stared at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You planning to sneak onto my base?" "I'm planning to enter it." As what? As the person most Americans are when they come to a government building. "And what is that?" "Nobody important." He had smiled. "You've always enjoyed making people nervous." "No, I enjoy learning what they do before they know they should be nervous." He approved the request. The Regional Inspector General knew. Halverson knew. Vanessa's aide, Lieutenant Commander Emily Ross, knew. 3 people at the Pentagon knew. Nobody at Gate 4 knew. The temporary authorization attached to her rental confirmed only what gate security needed. Identity verified, access approved, destination authorized. It did not display her rank. That was also intentional. At 6:36, she joined the line of vehicles entering Port Mason. The sky was the color of wet steel. A light wind came off the water. A young sailor in camouflage stood under the canopy checking identification, waving cars forward with the rhythm of someone who had already done it 100 times. Vanessa watched. Green pickup. 4 seconds. White SUV. 6. Blue sedan. 5. A contractor van took 22. Then a silver pickup driven by a white man in civilian clothes rolled forward. The sailor scanned the credential. The driver laughed about something. The sailor laughed too. 7 seconds. Then Vanessa reached the booth. The sailor glanced at her pass. His expression changed. Not dramatically. That was what interested her. He looked from the pass to her face, then back to the pass. "Morning, ma'am." "Purpose of visit?" "Administrative appointment." "With who?" "Regional headquarters." He looked at the paper again. "You work there?" "I have business there." "What kind of business?" Vanessa gave him the calm smile she had spent 3 decades using on congressional staffers, nervous junior officers, and once, memorably, a senator who had spent 20 minutes arguing about a regulation he had not read. "The authorization should list my destination." The sailor hesitated. Then a voice came from behind him. "Problem?" Chief Petty Officer Travis Rourke stepped out of the security office. 43. Broad through the shoulders, shaved head, the squared posture of a man who had spent most of his adult life in uniform. His name was stitched neatly over his pocket. Rourke. 8 years at Port Mason, 4 as Morning Gate supervisor. His evaluations described him as decisive, vigilant, highly effective. He was also the subject of 11 complaints in 28 months. Vanessa had read all 11. 10 had been closed with no finding. 1 had disappeared into an administrative review that seemed never to have been completed. That was one reason she had chosen Gate 4. Rourke leaned down toward her open window. License. She handed it to him. Vanessa Cole. Yes. You military? I have a valid authorization. That wasn't my question. She watched him for one quiet second. I'm here for an administrative meeting. He gave the license back to the young sailor. Run it again. The sailor scanned. The terminal showed green. Chief, it's approved. Rourke looked at the screen, then at Vanessa. Pull into secondary. The sailor looked surprised. Vanessa did not. She drove where he pointed. 642. She wrote it in the small black notebook on the passenger seat. A security officer approached the driver's window. Step out of the vehicle, please. She stepped out. Keys on the roof. She placed them where instructed. Open the trunk. She did. A second officer arrived. Then Rourke. What exactly are you carrying onto the installation? A suitcase, a laptop bag, and personal documents. Open the suitcase. Inside were folded civilian clothes, toiletries, running shoes, and a garment bag. Rourke touched the garment bag. What's this? Clothing. I can see that. He unzipped it 6 inches. White fabric showed inside. Vanessa calmly pulled the zipper closed. I'd prefer that remain protected. For the first time, something almost like amusement appeared in his face. Ma'am, once you're in a security inspection, you don't really get preferences. Behind him, another vehicle passed through the main lane. A middle-aged white man in golf clothes waved at the guard. The guard waved back. Vanessa's eyes followed it. Rourke noticed. You got a problem? No? Then look at me when I'm talking to you. She turned her eyes back to him. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to her that way, not because she believed she was intimidating, but because rank changes the temperature in a room before you say a word. People see stars. They become careful. Standing beside the rental sedan that morning, Vanessa had no stars. And so she was being given something rare, the unedited version. Rourke opened her laptop bag. He removed her charger, a folder, the notebook. What are you writing? Times. Times of what? My morning. He gave a short laugh. You documenting us? I document a great many things. That's some kind of threat? No. He looked at one of the officers. People come in here with cameras, notebooks, all kinds of stories. Then you ask a basic question, and suddenly everybody's a constitutional scholar. Vanessa said nothing. He flipped through the notebook. She held out her hand. That is personal. Then don't bring personal things onto a controlled installation. It contains no classified material. That your determination? Yes. The smile again. Not friendly. Ma'am, your determination doesn't carry much weight at my gate. She held his gaze. The younger sailor near the terminal looked down. Rourke closed the notebook and handed it back. You said administrative headquarters? Yes. You got an appointment? Yes. Name? Vanessa paused. Rear Admiral Halverson's office. That changed the younger sailor's expression, not Rourke's. You meeting the Admiral? I have business with the office. That isn't what I asked. She had learned long ago that there are moments when answering less tells you more. She gave him nothing. Rourke folded his arms. Here's the problem. You show up at a secure naval installation before 7 in the morning in a rental car, say you have business with regional command, won't clearly state who you're meeting, and start taking notes about gate operations. My authorization is valid. So you keep saying, is it? He frowned. Is what? Is my authorization valid? The younger sailor spoke quietly. Yes, ma'am. Rourke shot him a look. Then what regulation requires me to provide more than the approved purpose listed in that authorization? He took one step closer. You want to argue regulations with me? I asked which one applies. He stared. Then he laughed. Not loudly. That would have been easier. A small, dismissive laugh. Ma'am, if the Navy wanted you on this base, you'd already be inside. Vanessa looked at the dashboard clock. 6:51. She wrote that down too. For the next 38 minutes, she stood beside the rental car. At 6:58, a 19-year-old seaman apprentice came out of the visitor lot on foot, red-faced, holding a lug wrench the wrong way. Rourke saw her before anyone else did. He walked over, took the wrench, knelt on the wet asphalt in his uniform trousers, and changed the tire himself. It took 9 minutes. He talked the whole time, something about torque patterns, something that made her laugh. When he stood up, his knees were soaked, and he waved off her thanks. Vanessa watched all of it. She wrote that down too, and found she disliked writing it, and made herself write it anyway. It would have been simpler if the man were only one thing. Vehicles passed, some were searched, most were not. 2 delivery vans were opened. A young black sailor in an older Honda was sent to secondary and questioned 12 minutes over a base sticker that had expired the previous week, though his military credential was current. A white contractor arrived with the wrong lane pass and was redirected with a joke. Vanessa wrote down both. At 7:13, Rourke walked back over. Still taking notes? Yes. You know you're making this take longer, right? How? By being difficult. She closed the notebook. I have complied with every instruction. You've answered every question with another question. I answered the questions required for access. He shook his head. You people always think knowing one sentence from a policy means you understand security. Vanessa looked at him carefully. You people? He paused. The 2 words hung there. He seemed to hear them only after he had said them. People who come through here looking for an argument. I see. That's what I meant. She opened the notebook again. His jaw tightened. What did you just write? What you said. For a second, she wondered if he would order it taken. He did not. Instead, he leaned toward her. You know what? You can sit in the vehicle until visitor control opens. My authorization says I may enter now. I'm overriding it. On what security basis? My judgment. Please document that. His expression hardened. Excuse me? If you are overriding an approved access authorization, please document the reason. You telling me how to run my checkpoint? No, I'm asking you to record the decision you're making. Something changed in his face then. Not anger exactly. Irritation sharpened by uncertainty. People who expect submission are often more unsettled by calm than by defiance. At 7:29, he told the young sailor to process her through. No threat had been found. No discrepancy existed. No reason was written on the secondary inspection sheet beyond 3 words. Random security review. As she got back into the car, the younger sailor approached her window. His name tape read, Bell. He could not have been older than 22. Ma'am, I'm sorry about the delay. You didn't cause it. His eyes flicked away. No, ma'am. She drove onto the installation at 7:33, 51 minutes after entering secondary. Her meeting with Halverson was at 8. She arrived at 7:52. His office occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building overlooking the harbor. When she walked in, he was standing at the window holding coffee. He looked at her civilian clothes, then at the notebook, then at the faint dust mark on her jacket sleeve where she had leaned against the rental car. How bad? She sat down. Do you want the polite answer? I'm retiring in 3 weeks. I have no use for polite answers. Bad enough. He exhaled. Rourke? Yes. He looked toward the harbor. I was afraid of that. You knew? I knew there were complaints. 11:10 closed without finding. 1 incomplete. I know the number. I know all three of those things. She studied him. Then why is he supervising the gate? Halverson turned. Because complaints aren't findings. And because every commanding officer eventually learns the difference between what he suspects and what he can prove. He set the cup down. You think I ignored it? I think I haven't decided yet. He smiled without humor. There's the Vanessa Cole I remember. They had first served together 26 years earlier. He a lieutenant commander, she a lieutenant. Both had learned enough since to distrust simple explanations. He opened a folder and slid pages across. I had the IG pull the gate statistics you requested. Secondary inspections by gate, duration, disposition, complaints, vehicle incidents. There were numbers, and numbers could lie, but they needed help. Gate 4's secondary inspection rate ran nearly 30% above the other main entrances. That alone meant nothing. Gate 4 served more contractors, more commercial traffic, different hours. Vanessa kept reading. Then she stopped. Do we have demographic information? No. We don't collect race in the access log. Good. Halverson raised an eyebrow. You wanted it? I wanted to know whether it existed. It shouldn't. She tapped the page. But we have sponsor command, vehicle type, credential type, and repeat secondary selections. How many people have been selected 3 or more times in 60 days? IG is running it by noon. She closed the folder. What else is on my schedule? He almost laughed. You get held at the gate for 51 minutes and ask what's next. That was what's next. You could have shown him your military ID. You could have told him your rank. You could have ended it in 30 seconds. Vanessa looked at him. And then what would I know? Halverson stopped smiling. At 8:30 she left headquarters and did not change clothes. She spent the morning walking. The region covered 5 installations, but Port Mason was the headquarters and the largest. Nearly 17,000 uniformed personnel and civilian employees through its gates on an average weekday. She visited the Personnel Support Office, Family Services, the medical clinic lobby, where she sat for 40 minutes with a magazine she did not read, a dining facility. She asked ordinary questions. Where do spouses go for deployment resources? How long does it take a newly arrived sailor to update housing paperwork? What happens when a civilian employee's access card stops working? Most people were helpful. Some were excellent. A second-class petty officer in personnel support spent 11 minutes explaining a form she already understood, because she wanted to see how he treated someone he believed did not. He was patient. He never once made her feel foolish. She wrote his name down. Not everything in a notebook has to become evidence against someone. Sometimes it should become evidence for them. At 11:12, she entered the base food court. A woman in civilian clothes got in line behind her. Black, maybe mid-30s, hospital identification clipped to her purse, 2 children's photographs tucked behind the clear plastic. Vanessa recognized the badge lanyard from the clinic lobby. Vanessa ordered coffee. The woman ordered soup. They sat at neighboring tables. 10 minutes later, the woman spoke. You were at gate 4 this morning. I saw you when I came through. Then you were sitting in our lobby for most of an hour, and you don't have a patient file. Vanessa turned. That's a good eye. It's a small base. The woman lowered her voice. Chief Rourke? What makes you ask? She smiled tiredly. Because if it had been anyone else, you'd have been inside before your coffee got cold. Her name was Dr. Naomi Pierce. Civilian physical therapist, 7 years at Port Mason, sent to secondary screening 9 times in 4 months. Same car? Same car. Credential current? Always. Any explanation? Random. Every time? Every time. Naomi stirred her soup. The first few times I believed it. You work around the military long enough, you learn not to take security personally. What changed? Naomi looked toward the windows. One morning I was behind one of my coworkers. Same department, same access, same shift. She realized she'd left her badge in another bag. They let her pull aside and call our office. Very polite. I had my badge. Everything worked. I got searched. Your coworker is white. Naomi looked at her. Yes. Vanessa wrote nothing. Not yet. How many complaints have you filed? 2. First one said screening decisions were operational and not subject to customer preference. Second, said they reviewed the incident and found no policy violation. Who signed the response? Security Operations Officer, Commander Hale. Vanessa knew the name. Owen Hale, Installation Security Officer, 49, 17 years in security assignments. No formal complaints in his own record. Highly rated, expected to retire the following year. Did anyone interview you? No. Did anyone request dates? No. Did anyone ask which gate? No. Vanessa stopped. They responded without asking which gate? Naomi shrugged. Maybe they had it in the original form. Did you list it? I think so. Vanessa opened her notebook. This time she wrote, at 12:04, Emily Ross texted, IG data ready. Halverson was in a meeting, so Emily met her in an empty conference room. Emily was 34, precise, fast, and almost impossible to surprise. Almost. She put a spreadsheet on the monitor. I think you were right. Vanessa did not sit. Show me. Repeat secondary screenings by credential number, 60-day window, gate 4 only. Rows filled the screen. Most repeat selections are explainable. Contractors with vehicle issues. Expired registrations. Restricted delivery categories. Remove those. Emily clicked. The list shortened. Now remove anyone with documented cause. Another click. 26 names remained. 26 repeat screenings with no recorded trigger, Vanessa said. How many 3 times? 17. 4 or more, 9. Highest? Emily hesitated. 11. Hospital corpsman, first class. Terrence Wallace. Active duty? Yes. All 11 at gate 4. Supervisor? Emily clicked another field. 10 of 11 showed the same morning watch. Rourke. Vanessa felt something settle into place. Not proof, a shape. What can we infer about demographics? Nothing from the access data. Correct answer. Emily nodded. But I cross-referenced public command roster photographs after you asked. Vanessa's expression sharpened. That cannot become part of a disciplinary analysis. I know. Then don't put it in writing. I haven't. What did you see? Emily turned the monitor away. Of the 26 names with unexplained repeat screenings, 21 appear to be Black, Latino, Asian, or Middle Eastern. The room became very quiet. Through the narrow window in the door, sailors moved along the hallway. Young, busy, trusting that regulations were being applied for reasons regulations recognized. What about the comparison group? Still running. I want credential type, time of day, vehicle category, sponsor command, and prior gate alerts controlled as closely as possible. No conclusions yet. No, ma'am. Patterns are where investigations begin, not where they end. Vanessa had spent too many years watching people find what they expected because they stopped looking after the first fact that made them feel right. She would not do that. At 1:17, she went back to Gate 4 on foot and stood outside the visitor control building where civilians waited for temporary badges. Rourke was not there. A civilian security specialist named Karen Dorsey worked the counter. 50s, cardigan, a coffee mug that said, World's Okayest Employee. Vanessa asked for the complaint process. Dorsey handed her a printed form. Anything specific happen? Yes. You want a supervisor? Not yet. Dorsey pointed to a box on the form. Put date, time, lane if you remember, and any names. More details helps. Vanessa almost smiled. Thank you. You're welcome. That was how a system was supposed to work. Small competence, clear information, no theater. She filled out the form under her civilian name. The 51-minute detention. Rourke's statement. A request for the policy basis for overriding a valid access authorization. Then she handed it back. Dorsey read the first line. Her face changed. Chief Rourke? Yes. Dorsey looked toward the back office. I'll log this. Where does it go? Security operations. Who reviews it? Normally the watch supervisor first, then department. The watch supervisor reviews complaints about the watch supervisor? Dorsey stopped. It was the smallest hesitation, but Vanessa saw it. Sometimes, Dorsey said carefully, it depends on who's named. Who would review this one? I'd have to check. Vanessa nodded. Please do. She left, and did not think about the hesitation again for 11 weeks. At 1:43, Karen Dorsey sent the complaint into the system. At 1:51, the automated routing software delivered it to Chief Petty Officer Travis Rourke. Vanessa knew by 2:05 because Emily had requested a live trace of the workflow. She stared at the routing diagram. A complaint naming Rourke, sent to Rourke. Who designed this? Emily checked. Security operations updated the workflow 3 years ago. Goal was to resolve minor complaints at the lowest supervisory level. Efficient. That was the intent. Efficiency is a wonderful way to make a bad process move faster. Vanessa sat back. Who approved it? Commander Hale. At 2:18, another email appeared. Complaint disposition updated. Preliminary review. No actionable issue. That fast? 27 minutes. Did anyone call me? No. Interview the gate officer? No record. Review video? No request. Check the authorization? No. Who closed it? Emily looked at the screen. Travis Rourke. Vanessa sat silently for several seconds. Print that. At 3 o'clock, she met with Inspector General Captain Samuel Grant, a man who had spent 24 years developing the expression of someone who assumed every sentence in a meeting might one day be read aloud in court. Vanessa respected that. He reviewed the material. This is enough to open a command investigation. Not enough for findings. No. Not enough to call it discrimination. No. Enough to preserve evidence? Absolutely. Do it. Grant closed the folder. There's something else. We located the incomplete complaint. The 11th? Yes. It had been filed 6 months earlier by Petty Officer First Class Terrence Wallace. The sailor selected 11 times. Grant slid over a copy. 4 pages. Dates, times, descriptions, names of other personnel he had observed being selected. 3 sailors from his own unit who had entered the same gate within minutes of him and were not stopped. What was the disposition? There isn't one. Administratively closed. By whom? Grant looked at her. Commander Hale. Reason? Insufficient information. Vanessa turned back to the complaint. It contained more information than most complaints she had seen in her career. Was Wallace interviewed? No record. Rourke? No. Video pulled? No. Gate data reviewed? No. She looked up. So what was insufficient? Grant said nothing, because both of them knew. The investigation had been insufficient. At 4:10, Vanessa asked to speak with Terrence Wallace. Not as an admiral. Not yet. They met in a small classroom near the training building. Wallace was 36. Black, married, 2 daughters, 16 years in the Navy. He arrived in uniform and looked confused when he saw a woman in civilian clothes. Ma'am? My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm reviewing some installation access concerns. He looked toward Grant. Am I in trouble? No, Vanessa said. That question bothered her more than it should have. People who report problems should not begin every meeting wondering whether they are the problem. Wallace sat. She placed his complaint on the table. You wrote this? Yes, ma'am. Why? He laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because my wife told me if I came home mad one more time without doing something about it, she was going to file it herself. Smart woman. Yes, ma'am. Tell me what happened. He described the first stop, then the second. By the fourth, he had started recording dates. By the seventh, he had noticed something. Rourke often used a phrase before ordering secondary inspection. Need to verify access posture. What does that mean? Vanessa asked. I don't know. Is it in local procedure? Not that I could find. Wallace leaned forward. I'm not saying security shouldn't stop me. I'm Navy. I understand gates. I understand random checks. I've stood gate watch. What are you saying? I'm saying random starts feeling less random when you can predict it. Vanessa did not write. She listened. One morning I had my division officer behind me, Lieutenant Grayson. The white guy. Great officer. We were driving separately. I got pulled. He didn't. He waited inside 20 minutes because we were going to the same meeting. Did he witness the stop? Yes. Did anyone contact him during review of your complaint? No. How do you know? Because I asked him. Vanessa looked at Grant. Grant wrote something. Wallace rubbed his hands together. I almost withdrew it. Why? Chief Rourke pulled me aside 2 days after I submitted it. Her attention sharpened. What did he say? He said he'd heard I was unhappy with gate operations. Said I needed to think about what kind of reputation I wanted in the Navy. Said people remember who's a team player. Exact words? Close as I can remember. Anyone hear it? No. Did you document it? He looked embarrassed. No, ma'am. My wife told me I should. Your wife continues to sound smart. That earned a real smile. Then it faded. Can I ask something? Why now? Vanessa looked at him. Because tomorrow she would stand in dress whites and inherit authority over Port Mason. Because 12 hours from now, people who had ignored Terrence Wallace would suddenly become extremely interested in what she wanted. Because that was both the value and the danger of rank. Because someone finally read your complaint all the way to the end. Wallace looked down. He nodded once. The sentence seemed to land somewhere deeper than she had expected. At 5:32, the official workday was ending. Vanessa should have gone to quarters. Her uniform needed pressing. Emily had 3 briefing books waiting. The protocol officer had called twice. Instead, she walked back toward the gate. The late light stretched long across the pavement. Gate 4 had slowed. Rourke stood beside the booth talking to another chief. He saw her coming, and his expression was almost comical. Not fear, annoyance. You again. Good afternoon. You file a complaint? Yes. He laughed. You know I review those, right? I learned that. And I find that interesting. He stepped closer. Listen, Miss Cole, I don't know what your angle is. I don't have one. You spend all day walking around asking questions, talking to people, writing in that notebook. You tell me you've got business with command, but nobody tells me who you are. You never called command. His face tightened. What? You had my authorization. You said you were concerned about whether I had legitimate business with regional headquarters. At no point did you call regional headquarters to verify my appointment. She let that sit. You searched my luggage. You held me 51 minutes. You asked what was in my notebook. You questioned why I was observing gate operations. But you never made the one phone call that would have answered the question you claimed concerned you. For the first time all day, Rourke had no quick response. Then he recovered. I don't need a civilian telling me how to secure a Navy base. No, you don't. He seemed surprised. You need your own procedures to tell you. She turned to leave. You think that complaint's going somewhere? Vanessa stopped and looked back. Yes. Something in her voice made his smile disappear. He did not know why. Not yet. At 6:20, she entered her temporary quarters. Emily had hung the dress white uniform on the door. The jacket was immaculate. Gold sleeve stripes, ribbons, warfare insignia, and on each shoulder board, 2 silver stars. Vanessa stood looking at them. 32 years. She remembered being an ensign in 1994. standing watch on a night so cold the steel rail hurt through gloves. She remembered being the only black woman in more rooms than she cared to count, and people who underestimated her, and people who overestimated her, and people who assumed she represented every woman and every black officer and every officer from a working-class family in every mistake she made. She remembered the good commanders, the ones who corrected her privately and praised their sailors publicly, the ones who understood that authority was not permission to make someone smaller. Her phone rang. Halverson. You still planning to do tomorrow the normal way? Define normal. You come in. We salute. I give a speech about 38 years of service. You give a speech about the future. Everybody eats dry cake. That sounds terrible. It is tradition. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed. Peter. He heard the change in her voice. What did you find? She told him. Not everything. Enough. The routing system. Wallace. The repeat screenings. The closed complaint. Halverson was silent a long moment. Hale? His name is on the workflow and the Wallace disposition. You think he's protecting Rourke? I think I don't yet know why he made the decisions he made. You want me to relieve them tonight? No. Why? Because I'm not going to become what I'm investigating. She heard him waiting. We preserve the video, preserve logs, restrict deletion access. IG opens a formal review. Nobody gets punished because an admiral had a bad morning. It was more than a bad morning. I know. But if the rules matter when they protect me, they have to matter when they protect Rourke. Halverson exhaled. That line is going in your speech someday. Not tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? Vanessa looked at the uniform. Tomorrow they learn who was standing at the gate. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Port Mason began preparing for ceremony. Flags went up. Chairs were aligned inside Hangar 12. A brass ensemble warmed up near the stage. Sailors moved through the rows, placing programs on seats. Chief Rourke had received an instruction at 6:15 to report to Hangar 12 in dress uniform for security recognition. That did not strike him as unusual. His team had supported major events all year. Commander Owen Hale was already there, in service dress whites, speaking with the executive officer. At 8:36, Rourke entered and found a seat with the other senior enlisted leaders. Well, Petty Officer Bell sat 3 rows behind him. Terrence Wallace had not been invited. Vanessa had changed that. At 8:44, he entered and took a seat near the aisle, with no idea why regional headquarters had ordered him to attend. At 8:50, the hangar doors closed. Rear Admiral Peter Halverson stepped onto the stage. He looked older than he had the previous morning. Retirement had already begun pulling at him. He spoke about Port Mason, about sailors and families and storms weathered and deployments supported. He thanked civilian employees whose names most admirals never knew. Then his voice changed. The privilege of command is often described as the authority to make decisions. He paused. I have come to believe that is only half true. The greater privilege is being trusted with information other people cannot act upon without you. Vanessa listened from behind the curtain. A complaint, a warning, a young sailor saying something doesn't feel right, a civilian employee asking a question. Leadership is what we do with those moments before they become crises. Hale shifted slightly. Rourke did not. He still had no idea. The officer assuming command today has spent 32 years proving that she reads what others skim. Something flickered across Rourke's face. She. The official biography in the printed program had been intentionally abbreviated. Rear Admiral V. Cole. Rourke looked down at it. Cole. His eyes stopped moving. Behind him, Petty Officer Bell saw the moment, the way his shoulders went rigid. Ladies and gentlemen, officers, chiefs, sailors, Marines, civilian colleagues and families, it is my honor to introduce the incoming commander, Atlantic Shore Navy Region, Rear Admiral Vanessa Cole. The curtain opened. Vanessa walked out. White uniform, gold trim, Ribbons, 2 stars. For perhaps 3 seconds, the room forgot how to react. Then everyone stood. Her eyes moved through the crowd. Halverson, Emily, Grant, Hale, Wallace, Bell, and finally Travis Rourke. His face had gone absolutely still. Not pale, not dramatic, just still. Recognition moved through him slowly, painfully. The woman beside the rental sedan, the notebook, the suitcase, the 51 minutes, the complaint he had closed himself, the sentence he had spoken. Vanessa walked past him toward the stage. She did not look at him again. That was worse. The formal orders were read, salutes exchanged, command changed hands. Then Vanessa stepped to the podium. Her prepared speech sat inside a leather folder. She closed it. I had intended to speak this morning about readiness. The hangar quieted. And I will. But I have been reminded over the past 24 hours that readiness is not only the condition of our ships, our systems, or our people. It is also the condition of our character when we believe nobody important is watching. Rourke stared straight ahead. Yesterday morning, I entered Port Mason through Gate 4 in civilian clothes. A small movement traveled across the audience. Senior officers looked toward one another. I did so intentionally. My appointment had been properly authorized. My access had been cleared. My presence was known to the outgoing regional commander and the inspector general. I wanted to see this installation without ceremony. She placed both hands on the podium. I met a petty officer in personnel support who spent 11 minutes explaining a process to a woman he believed was simply confused. He was patient. He was respectful. Petty Officer Morales, I am told you are in this room. Thank you. Applause. A man near the back stood awkwardly, looking terrified as coworkers turned toward him. I also spent 51 minutes in a secondary security inspection after my authorization had been confirmed valid. I watched others enter. I asked for the policy basis of the delay. None was provided. Silence. Rourke's jaw moved. I filed a complaint. That complaint was automatically routed to the supervisor named in the complaint. He closed it 27 minutes later without interviewing me, without interviewing the gate personnel, without reviewing video, and without examining the access authorization. Hale looked down. That process ends today. The Inspector General has opened a formal review of complaint handling and secondary screening practices at Port Mason. Relevant video, access logs, and records have been preserved. An independent team from outside installation security will conduct the investigation. Rourke finally looked at her. Vanessa met his eyes. For anyone wondering whether I am announcing conclusions this morning, I am not. I have 1 day of observation. 1 day does not prove a system. 1 complaint does not prove intent. 1 disturbing interaction does not justify denying anyone due process. She paused. That includes the people whose actions are under review. Rourke looked away. But neither does a uniform excuse us from review. She looked toward the young sailors seated near the rear. Rank does not make dignity more valuable. Then toward senior leadership. And lack of rank does not make dignity less valuable. Terrence Wallace lowered his head. Vanessa saw him wipe at one eye quickly and hoped nobody beside him noticed. I entered this base yesterday without visible authority. Her voice softened. That should not have mattered. I should not need 2 stars to receive an explanation. Neither should a spouse, or a civilian employee, or a 19-year-old seaman. No person should have to reveal that someone powerful knows their name before our regulations begin applying exactly as written. There was no applause. She did not want any. This was not a victory speech. It was an obligation. We will review the facts. We will protect the people who report concerns. Her eyes moved toward Wallace. We will protect the people accused of wrongdoing until the evidence establishes what happened. Then back to the room. And when we know, we will act. She stepped away. The applause began slowly, not celebratory, something heavier. People stood. Rourke stood because everyone else did. Vanessa could see what he was thinking. Not only that she was an admiral, That she had been one yesterday. Every second, every question, every dismissive smile. None of her authority had begun that morning. Only his awareness of it had. Captain Grant caught her in the corridor behind the hangar before she had reached the end of it. "Ma'am, may I speak freely?" "Always. You just described the specific conduct of two identifiable officers, by circumstance, in front of 1,100 people, 8 weeks before I convene anything." He kept his voice level. "Every witness I interview will have heard the regional commander describe what happened before I ask them what happened." Vanessa stopped walking. "Rourke's counsel will file on unlawful command influence," Grant said. "He'll be right to. And I will have to answer him, and I don't currently know what I'll say. Sam, ma'am, you stood up there and said one day doesn't prove a system. I agree with you. But you spent that day as the victim, and then you announced it from a podium with 2 stars on your shoulders." He paused. "I'm not saying you were wrong about the gate. I'm saying you may have made it harder to prove." Vanessa stood in the corridor for a moment, with the brass ensemble still audible through the wall. She had thought about the speech for 11 hours. She had thought about what it would mean to Wallace, and to Bell, and to a 19-year-old who had never once been told that a question is not a crime. She had not thought carefully enough about what it would mean to a hearing officer. "What do you need from me?" Silence. Total. "You don't discuss this with staff, you don't ask me how it's going, and you recuse yourself from any disciplinary recommendation in writing today, not in 11 weeks when it's convenient. Draft it. I'll sign it before lunch." Grant nodded and turned to go. "Captain," he stopped. "You were right to say that to me." "Yes, ma'am," said Grant. "It would have been easier not to." The investigation lasted 11 weeks. It did not produce the simple story many people expected. Travis Rourke was not found to have personally selected every sailor who had complained. Some stops had legitimate security explanations that were poorly recorded. Some repeat screenings resulted from software risk flags nobody at Gate 4 could see. One complaint was based on a misunderstanding. 2 witnesses remembered events differently. That mattered. Truth does not become less important because complexity is inconvenient. But other things were clear. Gate 4 used discretionary secondary screening at significantly higher rates than comparable gates during Rourke's watch. When obvious operational factors were controlled, unexplained repeat selections remained. Those selections disproportionately affected personnel from minority backgrounds. Investigators found no written order instructing officers to screen anyone based on race. They found something subtler. Rourke had created an informal category called attitude check. It appeared nowhere in Navy policy. Sailors who questioned screening decisions, asked for supervisory review, or requested written explanations were more likely to be selected again on later visits. Rourke described it as heightened awareness for difficult individuals. Investigators called it what it was: retaliatory discretion. Terrence Wallace's credential number appeared on an unofficial spreadsheet stored on the Gate 4 shared drive. Beside his name, 2 words: always verify. Naomi Pierce appeared too. Argumentative civilian. Vanessa's temporary visitor number had been added that Thursday afternoon. Notebook lady. When Grant showed her the entry, she looked at it for a long time. Notebook lady. "Yes, ma'am. I've had worse." Grant almost smiled. "Would you like the serious part?" I assumed there was one. The spreadsheet contained 68 names. 51 belonged to Black, Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, or mixed-race personnel and civilians. The demographic pattern alone did not establish why every name was added, but the interviews established something else. Words like aggressive, what, argumentative, who, difficult, that, suspicious, and attitude appeared far more frequently in notes about minority personnel than in notes describing similar behavior by white personnel. The investigators found the examples side by side. A white contractor who raised his voice after being delayed was noted as frustrated. A black sailor who requested a supervisor without raising his voice was labeled confrontational. A white civilian who refused permission for an unnecessary trunk search was listed as concerned about privacy. A black civilian who asked the same question was labeled non-compliant. Same conduct, different language, and language had consequences. Once someone was described as difficult, the next guard treated them as difficult before they spoke. That was how a bias became a process. Not with a sign, not with an order, with a word entered into a field. Then copied, then trusted, then repeated. The team contacted all 68 names. Not everyone wanted to speak. A retired civilian machinist named Delia Fontaine listened to the whole introduction on the phone and then asked the investigator to repeat the part about the spreadsheet. "You're telling me there was a list?" "Yes, ma'am." "And I'm on it." "Yes, ma'am." She was quiet long enough that he checked whether the call had dropped. "I worked there 19 years, she said. "I used to leave the house 40 minutes early. My husband thought I liked the drive." Another pause. "I want you to write down that I said this. I thought it was me. For about 6 years, I thought there was something about me." The investigator wrote it down. "Are you all right, ma'am?" "I'm 71 years old and I retired in March," said Delia Fontaine. "I'm about as all right as I'm going to get." 14 of the 68 had filed prior complaints. 9 had never received a response. 3 complaints could not be located at all. That became another investigation. The Dorsey finding came in week 9, and Vanessa read it twice. Karen Dorsey had known about the routing defect for 3 years. She had raised it once, in an email, to a security operations chief who had since transferred. She had received no reply. After that, she had continued handing out complaint forms to anyone who asked, and had quietly stopped suggesting them to anyone who didn't. Investigators counted at least 4 occasions when a visitor had described conduct that plainly warranted a complaint, and Dorsey had said only that she was sorry about the delay. She was not disciplined. She had violated no policy. Nothing in her position required her to escalate a workflow design she had reported once and been ignored about. But Vanessa had thanked her by name, from a podium, in front of 1,100 people, on the strength of a 90-second interaction. She had done exactly what she had spent the whole day condemning. She had taken a small sample of a person's behavior and concluded she knew the shape of it, and had been so pleased to find someone doing the job correctly that she had never once asked how long Karen Dorsey had been watching the same thing she had just discovered. Grant said nothing about it. Emily said nothing about it. That was somehow worse. Vanessa asked Dorsey to come to headquarters. She came in the same cardigan. "I owe you an apology," Vanessa said. Dorsey looked genuinely alarmed. "Ma'am, I'm the one who—" "No, I praised you publicly for something I had observed for 90 seconds, and I did it in the same speech where I criticized a man for making judgments about people he had observed for 90 seconds. She let that stand. It was the same error. It only felt different because mine was flattering. Dorsey sat down slowly. It was a nice thing to have happen to me. I know. That's what makes it hard to see. I should have kept pushing on the routing. You reported it once and were ignored. I'm not going to let you carry the part of this that belongs to the Navy. Vanessa closed the folder. But I'd like to ask you something, and I would like a truthful answer. Over 3 years, how many people did you not tell about the form? Karen Dorsey looked at her hands for a long moment. I don't know, she said. I stopped counting on purpose. Commander Owen Hale's role was more complicated. He had not created the spreadsheet. He said he did not know it existed, and investigators believed him. But he had approved the complaint routing system that allowed supervisors to review allegations about themselves. He had closed Terrence Wallace's complaint after reading only the executive summary. He had not interviewed Wallace. He had not reviewed gate logs. He had assumed that because no regulation had been explicitly violated in the written report, no deeper review was necessary. That failure had allowed the practice to continue. When Vanessa met with him after the findings were complete, Hale sat across from her at regional headquarters. No lawyers, no ceremony, 2 officers. "I failed," he said. Vanessa said nothing. He looked older than he had 11 weeks earlier. "I keep trying to find a better word." "Why?" "Because." "Failed." "Sounds like I tried." He looked at his hands. "I signed the disposition. I remember the complaint now. I read the first page. Rourke's response was attached. He said the sailor had become difficult after repeated security checks. Did you read Wallace's dates? No. The witness names? No. The comparison vehicles? No. Hale shook his head. I had 72 open action items that week, 2 readiness inspections, a staffing shortage, a pier security issue. I told myself it was a gate complaint. And gate complaints are easy. He looked up. That's what I thought. Do you still? No. Vanessa leaned back. One thing I have learned, Commander, is that institutions do their greatest harm with the tasks leadership decides are too small to deserve attention. He nodded. What happens now? You will receive formal administrative action for failure of oversight. You will be removed from security operations. You will remain in the Navy until the process determines whether you retire on schedule. Hale looked surprised. You're not recommending separation? I'm not recommending anything. I recused myself in writing the morning I took command. She pushed the report toward him. But if you're asking what I think, after what happened to me, is not a standard. If I used this office to punish people because they embarrassed me personally, I'd have learned nothing. You are accountable for what the evidence establishes. No more, no less. Hale nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Travis Rourke's hearing occurred 2 weeks later. He arrived with counsel. He was still a chief petty officer, still entitled to representation, still entitled to challenge evidence. His counsel did file on command influence. The motion ran 19 pages and quoted Vanessa's speech in full. Grant's ruling acknowledged that the regional commander's public remarks had been improper in their specificity, ordered the members instructed accordingly, and excluded Vanessa's own gate incident from consideration entirely. The remaining evidence was sufficient without it. That was luck, and Vanessa knew it was luck. The hearing found Rourke responsible for improper discretionary screening practices, retaliatory notation of individuals who questioned gate procedures, failure to properly review complaints, and unprofessional conduct. It did not conclude that every action he took was racially motivated. It did conclude that his discretion produced a repeated unequal impact, and that he ignored evidence of that pattern after complaints made it impossible to claim he had never been warned. He was removed from supervisory security duties. His evaluation was formally downgraded. His security qualification was suspended. Months later, he transferred to a non-security assignment and completed his remaining service there. Some people thought that was too little. Others thought it was too much. Vanessa thought neither opinion changed the evidence. Petty Officer Bell found him in the parking lot afterward, sitting in his truck with the door open and both feet on the asphalt, still in dress uniform, holding his cover in his lap. Bell had not planned to say anything. He had testified that morning, and what he had testified to was true, and it had not been on Rourke's side. Chief. Rourke looked up. It took him a second. Bell. Bell stopped. He had nothing prepared. You told the truth, Rourke said. That's the job. Yes, Chief. Rourke turned his cover over in his hands. You know what I keep coming back to? No, Chief. That spreadsheet. He said it slowly, like a man reading a language he half knew. I didn't sit down one day and build that. I put a name in it, because a guy gave me a hard time on a Tuesday, and I didn't want to explain it twice on Thursday. He shook his head. 68. I never once opened it and looked at the whole thing. Not one time in 4 years. Bell said nothing. Wallace has kids, Rourke said. I've met his kids. Toy drive 2 years running. His youngest wanted a... He stopped. You know, I keep starting that sentence like it goes somewhere good. He put his cover on and pulled the door closed, and the window came down halfway. Go home, Bell. You did fine. He backed out and drove toward the gate, and stopped at gate 4 like everybody else, and the sailor in the booth waved him through in 4 seconds. Gate procedures changed. Discretionary secondary screenings now required a standardized reason code. Random selections were generated by system sequence rather than supervisor preference wherever operationally feasible. Complaint routing moved outside local security. Supervisors could no longer close complaints naming themselves. Repeat secondary selections automatically triggered quarterly review, and every person working installation security received a new instruction that Vanessa insisted appear on the first page of training. A question is not resistance. That sentence caused arguments. Some security personnel said it oversimplified. Vanessa agreed. Then she kept it. Complicated rules are often easier to remember when they begin with a simple truth. 6 months after the change of command, Vanessa returned to Gate 4. This time she wore uniform. The sailor in the booth recognized her immediately. Everyone recognized her now, which made the visit less useful, so she stood 50 yards away beside the visitor building and watched. A gray sedan approached. Black woman driving, about Vanessa's age. The guard scanned her credential. The woman rolled the window down farther, already looking tense. The guard asked a question. She answered. He pointed toward secondary. Vanessa felt something tighten inside her. Then she waited. The guard walked over with a tablet. He showed the woman the screen and explained something. She nodded. He smiled. She smiled. 3 minutes later, she drove through. No raised voices. No searching for reasons. No humiliation. Vanessa looked at her watch and then noticed someone standing beside her. Terrence Wallace. He had transferred to regional staff after being promoted to senior chief, not because of the complaint. Vanessa had made sure of that. His record had already earned it. Watching the gate, Admiral? Old habit. He looked toward the lane. Different now. Yes. You think it stays different? Vanessa smiled. That is a much harder question. He laughed. My wife would say that means no. Your wife is still smart. She reminds me daily. They watched another car pass. Then Wallace became quiet. Can I tell you something? The day Captain Grant called me about my complaint, I thought I was in trouble. I'd already decided I was done reporting anything. Ever. What changed? You read it. The words were simple. They struck her with the same force they had in that classroom. I don't mean you fixed everything, Wallace said. You didn't. I certainly didn't. I mean somebody read it. He looked toward Gate 4. That sounds small until you've spent 6 months believing you shouted into an empty room. Vanessa said nothing. There was nothing to add. Later that year, she spoke to a group of newly selected commanding officers at Newport. She did not tell them the whole Port Mason story. Stories grow cleaner in retelling, and real life rarely deserves that treatment. She told them about the notebook, about times and forms, about Terrence Wallace, about a complaint that contained 4 pages of evidence and was closed by a man who read one, about a speech she had given from a podium that nearly cost the investigation its integrity, and a captain with 24 years of caution who had been brave enough to tell her so in a hallway. Then she told them something she wished someone had told her when she first received command. You are going to be sent problems that look too small for your rank. A gate delay, a housing complaint, a sailor who says his supervisor talks to him differently, a spouse who has called 3 times about paperwork. She looked across the room. You will have bigger things. Readiness. Budgets. Deployment. Congress. You will be tempted to believe the small thing can wait. She paused. Sometimes it can, and sometimes the small thing is the only place the truth is still visible. A captain in the front row raised his hand. "Admiral, how do you know the difference?" Vanessa smiled. "You don't." A few people laughed. She did not. "That's why you read." Years later, people at Port Mason still told the story about the morning Chief Rourke learned that the woman he had delayed at Gate 4 was the incoming regional commander. Naturally, the story improved every year. Some versions said Vanessa had been handcuffed. She had not. Some claimed Rourke dropped his coffee when she walked onto the stage. He did not have coffee. One especially dramatic version said every sailor in the hangar turned to stare at him. That did not happen either. Most people did not even know where he was sitting. Stories like spectacle. Truth is quieter. The truth was that one woman stood beside a rental car for 51 minutes and wrote down times. The truth was that a sailor kept dates after his wife told him not to let them disappear. The truth was that a civilian employee handed over a complaint form without knowing who was receiving it and had stopped counting the people she never handed one to. The truth was that a system built to move complaints efficiently had been designed so efficiently that a man could receive a complaint about himself and close it before lunch. And the truth was that Vanessa Cole's 2 stars did not make any of those facts more important. They only gave her enough authority to make other people read them. On the first anniversary of her assumption of command, Vanessa arrived at headquarters before sunrise. She still preferred early mornings. The harbor was dark, ships sitting against the pier lights like enormous black silhouettes. On her desk was a small package, no return address. Inside was a new black notebook. The first page contained a handwritten note. "Admiral Cole, my wife says important people need to write things down too. Congratulations on 1 year. Respectfully, Senior Chief Terrence Wallace." Underneath, in different handwriting, someone had added, "He still forgets things. Angela Wallace." Vanessa laughed alone in her office. Then she opened the notebook, wrote the date on the first line, and under it, 5:47 a.m., Gate 4. Traffic moving normally. She stopped and looked through the window toward the distant security lights. A year earlier, she had come to Port Mason, hoping to learn what the Navy did when no one important was watching. She had eventually understood that the question was wrong. Someone important was always watching. The young sailor, the civilian employee, the spouse, the person in line behind you, the person being told to wait. The institution simply does not always know their importance yet. She closed the notebook. At 7:30, she had a readiness briefing. At 9, shipyard leadership. At noon, budget review. The kind of problems admirals are expected to solve. Before leaving the office, she opened her email. A message had arrived overnight from an enlisted spouse. Subject: Housing Office, 3rd request. There were 47 unread emails above it. Several carried red priority flags. One was from Washington. One was from a 3-star admiral. One concerned an operational issue that would occupy half her morning. Vanessa opened the spouse's message first. Not because she knew it was more important, because she knew enough not to assume that it wasn't.